ask questions and get as honest an answer as we can give you in as short a time as we can. And I want to give as many people as possible an opportunity to speak as we go through. So first of all, I might go to a couple of questions that have been sent online prior to the meeting. And in particular, I want to start with what I thought was a very good place to start from Keely Chapman. What has prompted the framework and why did it all start? What prompted the framework all comes out of the question. All of this comes out of the events that started at the beginning of the year that saw the borders close and access by international students to our universities decline. We found ourselves in the position of seeing some $5 billion of income disappearing from the sector over the next 9 months between here and the end of the year. That's an enormous amount of money. And our figuring is that this is going to represent some 20,000 job losses over the year. That's on 2020 figures. 2020 figures are based upon the fact that the international students were restricted in semester 1, and that has had a drop of enrolments that is going to have an obvious budgetary impact. In semester 2, it's potentially much, much worse because there will be no international travel in all likelihood, and we are facing the prospect of having no international students, at least new commencing international students in second semester. If you project forward to next year, the limitations on international student arrivals, even though the borders may be partially opened and opportunities are created for international students to come in, we will be looking at a world economy that will see significant downturn and that people will not be in a position to be able to afford to come to university in Australia. We saw after the Asian financial crisis a drop in international students. That was a far lesser set of circumstances than that we're facing now. And if worse comes to worse, we could be faced with significantly higher losses than the $5 billion projected for this year. With that background, and knowing that the federal government was highly resistant to putting any money into the sector, we have two choices to make. We have a choice that we can do something about it to the extent that we are able, and that we can try and protect as many of those people's jobs as we can, or we could be faced, or we could stand by and watch the universities do what they already can do under our industrial laws. And that includes making people redundant, terminating casual contracts, and terminating fixed-term contracts almost at will, and with very little capacity for the union to fully intervene in that process. The framework that we've set up is designed and structured to protect as many jobs as possible, knowing that anybody who goes into who ends up losing their job as a consequence of this process is going to end up finding it very difficult to get a job in an economy that is at least in recession, if not in a depression. And we will very seriously struggle to be able to protect those people under those circumstances. We are, as I said, left with a choice of doing nothing or doing something. It's not a palatable choice, but it's a hard choice, and faced between a rock and a hard place, we've taken the hard place. What we've attempted to negotiate with the universities is an agreement that provides the union with much more oversight and much more capacity to protect people's jobs than our current agreements provide. That's exactly the reason why a number of universities have already declared that they don't want to participate in it. They don't want to participate in it not because they don't want the salary savings and other things that the framework provides. They're saying no because they don't want to have the limitations on how they behave. This agreement is structured to designed to ensure that people have an opportunity to protect their jobs wherever possible. But it's not perfect. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to everybody that this is a framework that will protect every job in the sector. We've said publicly that we believe that this will protect around 12,000 jobs. There are around 20,000 jobs that we think are at risk. There is no way that it is going to be possible to prevent what's coming to some extent. We are going to be looking at voluntary departure packages. And I might just talk quickly about what the impact of all of this is going to be on the union. At the moment, our surveys that we've done around the country have indicated that somewhere between 10 to 15% of the workforce are likely to want to take access to voluntary departure packages. In that context, if the union's membership is a little over 30,000, and we are looking at a population in the union that is older than the general population, we could be looking in the union at job losses and reductions in membership of the order of 3,000 to 5,000 members. And so the union could go from its highest ever membership point to its lowest ever membership point in the space of 6 months. This is actually going to be difficult to avoid because, as I said, people will leave the sector. They won't want to participate in what it is we're going to be going into. So they will take voluntary departure packages. And yes, the framework does provide managements with the capacity to make people redundant where the work has ceased to exist. The same applies for terminating contracts and casual labour. But importantly, what the framework provides is protections for those people so that if the work continues, it is provided to the people who are doing the work. So there are many places where casual staff are going to be, have already found themselves terminated as a consequence of budget cuts and announcements being put out at RMIT in particular, asking for volunteers to do work that was previously done by casuals is a very clear example of the sort of thing that we would be able to prevent with this framework. If the work is continuing and needs to be done, then the work stays with the people who are doing it. That is the underlying principle that sits underneath this framework. That's a summary of where we've got to and why we are here where we are. I don't pretend that this is an easy decision. I will say one quick thing about the framework and what the language that others have been asking about it. Firstly, let me say that the framework provides some maxima built within it. That does not mean that every university who gets access to those things will go to the maxima. So the thresholds of 10% in category A and 15% in category B have been talked about a lot, about the potential job losses, reductions in salary and other things that might apply. That is true. It's a true statement, but it doesn't mean that every institution will do the things that they have access to. And we are waiting to see how the institutions are going to declare themselves over the coming weeks. I have been asked a couple of questions, and I will start with someone who I know is a direct critic of myself and of the union in this regard, because I think it's appropriate that I be able to answer the questions that you guys ask, and that you should feel free to ask me whatever questions you want. To the extent that I'm able to, I will answer them. So the questions come from Ros Ward. Ros has asked, why won't you have a debate with the No campaign at RMIT? Well, for a start, I haven't been asked to do that. What I was asked to do was do a Q&A. And our Q&A, in my understanding, is an opportunity to provide information and for people to ask questions and get clarification. And I'll go to the second point, which partially also goes to why this has been structured the way it is. Have you watched the recording of our biggest ever branch meeting at RMIT, where we had on Friday that passed a motion to vote no? What do you think? Oh, no, I haven't seen the whole video. The video, I don't have access to the full video. All I have access to is a 2-minute summary of a bunch of people saying yes, which is clearly people endorsing a motion. I don't know whether or not that process was comprehensive. I don't know whether or not everybody got an opportunity to be heard, but I understand that there is a strong sense of concern at RMIT about what's being proposed. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to answer your questions. But I do know that at that last meeting, I've also had a number of reports. I've had reports of people who felt as if they were shut down that they were shouted down, that they were not given a proper opportunity to listen and to hear the issues that people wanted to raise. So I'm not going to provide a mechanism for the sorts of, shall we say, hostile tactics that have been used in some other meetings. I know that staff of the union, who I have a responsibility for, have found themselves in the position of being abused on some of the previous forums. That's not the way in which the National Tertiary Education Union does its business. We are a union who prides itself on on representing people who are engaged in debate and controversy about matters of significance, but they do so within reasonable frames. And it should be possible for us to have this discussion and this debate without people being abused and people feeling intimidated. That's not what we're about, and I won't countenance that sort of thing in the future. A couple of other questions. If staff at RMIT can demonstrate that they work under the new arrangements, why would management try to continue them into the next version of our EBA? Well, that's a question for our members. That's about negotiation. This agreement, this variation to the agreements is time limited. It is only 12 months in duration. And the employers would have to come to the table to renegotiate our agreements. It's like any other bargaining frame. We've had difficult circumstances before and we've come through them. There's no doubt that if the worst case scenario comes into play, we will be having a difficult bargaining round next round. But it will be really up to our members to decide that they're prepared to stand up and fight for their conditions of employment. And we will be fighting for our conditions of employment. We will find ourselves coming out of a period of austerity, and we will need all of our resources, united, not divided, to be able to try and fight back any concessions that universities may seek to make. But this is a time-limited concession. It is time-limited for us as well as for them. So while, Ros, you might ask the question, why wouldn't they want them to continue? Well, the same argument might be said for the protections that we've put in this agreement. We would be seeking to extend the protections that we've sought in this agreement. I can't predict the outcome of the next bargaining round. That's for us to work out, and we have a little bit of time before we get there. So fortunately, we will deal with that question over the coming months. When do we get to see the actual schedule of variations in our agreement? I would hope that we will be able to do that sometime next week, because the final text is still being negotiated and drafted. So we will hopefully be in a position next week to be able to provide a full text of the variation. Will the NTEU leadership support campuses who vote no on 25th of May to continue to campaign against and vote no in any subsequent proposed EBA variations? The NTEU is a unitary entity. We are a union. We have democratic processes, and I'll talk through the democratic processes we are going to go through. But our democratic processes are robust. They allow for debate and discussion. And when we make a decision as a union. We don't make a decision as independent branches. So my expectation is that we would form a decision, and once that decision is settled, then the union would act in accordance with the decisions that it's made. But if there is a strong no case and the members on the ground say that they don't want it at their institution, then in all likelihood it won't get up at ballot. So it becomes a Pyrrhic question. But the union will not be able to sign an agreement with the employers that says, we want these protections and we want you to make yourself accountable in the following ways if we don't also abide by that agreement. And so the union will be obliged to abide by that agreement. With that start, there were a couple of other questions that have come up, but what I might do is perhaps ask my colleagues here if we've got people that have already indicated a desire to speak, and maybe we can go directly to some speakers as we go through. Okay, look, I've got some other questions that have been sent through, and I'll just respond to these questions while I'm waiting to see a speakers list. Why isn't there a progressive pay cut? Sorry, I'm now lost it.
Why isn't there progressive pay cuts starting from the top, already on the low?
That's all right, I'll read it. Why isn't there a progressive pay cut starting from the top? Staff on lower HUE levels 1 to 6 who are already on a low to middle income with kids at school, mortgages and bills to pay, can't afford a pay cut. While a 20% pay cut for someone on 900,000 is pocket change. Well, the structure of the proposal doesn't provide that pay cuts have to happen. But where pay cuts do happen, there's a $30,000 threshold that does not apply, that no cut is applied to. That is deliberately designed to protect particularly the low paid professional staff who find themselves struggling. There is also an exception. Where people have got hardship, then there is an opportunity or a mechanism that will be built in to provide people to seek exemption from that. And this is from Karen Lepic. Why can we not look at staff accepting less hours rather than less pay? A union is supposed to protect fair pay and fair working conditions. This is why I'm a union member. Yes, that is correct. There is provisions in there that provide for, instead of pay cuts, for pay reductions. The problem fraction reductions. There are two problems with fraction reductions though. Firstly, particularly when you've got staff who are already feeling overworked, to say you have to take a fraction reduction is a difficult ask for them. So in effect, particularly the variation requires that any fraction reduction has to be in whole days, either a whole day a month or a whole day a fortnight or whatever way it's structured. It's a difficult ask to ask somebody who's already overloaded to take a fraction reduction if there is not also a reduction in work. So one of the requirements that we've built into the framework is that if there is a reduction in fraction, workload has to be reduced. Now that means that a lot of people will be left out of a fraction reduction. And while it's not palatable, the reality is that the numbers that we are talking about, if we are looking to save jobs, we have to find a way of providing the institutions with sufficient funds to be able to provide the guarantees that the framework provides. That means that the only way that we could find that we could do that and make the numbers add up was to provide access to salary reductions. It's not ideal. Nobody wants it. I certainly didn't get involved in the union to find myself negotiating pay reductions. That's not what I'm about. But I do know this, we've got a clear choice. We are going to be watching over the next 6 months as thousands of people leave the sector. Are we going to stand by and watch that happen? Are we going to do nothing while they leave, while they exit the sector? When we know we have mechanisms, are we prepared to act collectively where the majority and the stronger majority can do what they can to protect the weaker and more vulnerable? That's what this is about. It's about providing the moral support to those people who are most at risk in the current environment. I'm now asking, Liam, do you want to go? And can I ask that the contributions be kept short to a minute, and so that we can get through as many contributions as we can?
I have no problem with brevity, Matthew. I'm not on the National Executive. Can I ask, my question is, why our calculations show that an average Q4 worker at RMIT, who might be on $65,000 a year, which is also coincidentally about median female wage, that the combination of cuts to her income that would be brought on if this framework is enacted would be, if we were put in category B, which some people are saying is possible for RMIT, if that was to happen, that woman would lose about $375 a fortnight. That's what our calculations show. Now, I've seen around the traps on social media saying that that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. No one from the National Executive has shown us their calculations. Are you disputing our calculations, and can you show us yours?
Look, I'm being told that I haven't checked those calculations properly, Liam, so I'm not in a position to properly respond right now, but we will check those calculations and get a response provided. I'll say a couple of things about it. There are provisions in there that are meant to deal with hardship, where there are particular hardship. There are protections in there that are designed to protect the lower pay. That's why it's structured the way it is. But what it's also designed to do is to ensure she ends up with no income, or that she doesn't end up with no income. We are trying to protect people's jobs here. And unless we can find a mechanism to provide the employers with access to income that they don't currently have, there will be massive job losses across the sector. As I said, we believe that we can save somewhere of the order of 12,000 jobs with this proposal. I don't pretend it's every job. But the question for us is, are we prepared to act collectively to carry the weight of individuals who are going to find themselves thrown out on the trash heap? We are looking at people losing their livelihoods, not being able to pay their mortgages, not being able to feed their families. Are we prepared to come together to make a collective sacrifice in order to protect the weakest? And that's what this framework is designed to do. We have another hand up. Then in which case I'll go and look to, what have we got here? Sam's asked a question. One of the biggest issues here is, why was no mandate sought from members first before pursuing the strategy? The members were advised within a week of the first discussions with the employers on this question. The National Executive, which is the supreme decision-making body of the union, has been involved all along. We took a decision to our a recommendation to our National Council members, and we got an 85% support at our National Council. We've used all the normal democratic processes we needed in order to give authority to the decisions that we were making. We would certainly not be doing anything without the authority of the key decision-making bodies of the union. And right now, I have to tell you, we are getting overwhelming support across the nation for what it is we are trying to achieve. I realise that there is strong resistance at RMIT and a couple of other branches, but we have had something of the order of 3,500 to 4,000 members join over the last few months, and overwhelmingly, the reason why they're joining is because they're concerned about their job security and they want to support the union in what it's doing. We've had close to 500 members join in the last week as a consequence of the email that went out. Now, I know some will claim that that's all because of the No campaign and everybody's joining up to vote no. But I know because we ask questions when people join. We have put a survey out and we ask people, what is it that prompted you to join the union? And it's from those answers to those questions that I know that the majority of people want this framework. So we have acted appropriately. Members were told as soon as it was possible. And just because people don't agree with the decisions doesn't mean that they haven't been asked or haven't been given an opportunity to express a view. Where are we up to? Sorry, everybody, I'm just trying to locate the questions. What have we got, guys?
Leave it over to the social media.
Who's that? My apologies, everybody. Technology is challenging. Just give us a second. I have some questions.
See if I can find any.
So will our union fees be reduced? The answer to that is, that's from Ian McGowan. Yes, the union fees will be reduced, and the reason they'll be reduced is they're a percentage of income. Every individual's fees, well, sorry, I'll start again. other than casual members, all members have a fee that is based on a percentage of income. That percentage of income is 1%. So that goes up and down with people's salaries. So if there is a reduction in income, then that goes down. What pay cuts are NTEU staff taking? I'm not asking my staff to take NTEU to take pay cuts. That would be unreasonable. But I certainly will be in two ways. I have my income is based upon a formula that is based on the average member fee, average member income. And so naturally, as members' income goes up and down, so does mine. It is not independently set. It is set as a function of members' income. But in addition to that, I will be taking an additional pay cut. But I'll be announcing that more fully once we've got to a position where this agreement has been approved, assuming it gets approved. Alex, I think I have answered your question. When do we get to see the actual schedule of variations? That will hopefully be able to be provided next week. And the question about what aspects of the framework will be amended in relation to concerns raised by members, or is this simply a consultation process? That's by Bridget Keane. Bridget, there are some elements that we are going back and trying to get some clarification on. For example, the impact of variations on people who are already on pre-retirement contracts. Those things were not thought about, if I'm honest about it, when we did the initial negotiations. So we are going back to get some clarification on that, and I'm hopeful we'll get some minor changes to give effect to that. The broad frame of the agreement, though, is pretty much settled. It's really a take it or leave it exercise for the NTEU. We have to make a decision. Are we going to do things? Are we going to accept the framework, or are we not? It's as good a framework as I think we could possibly negotiate under the circumstances. So from Michael Evans, why won't the NTEU National Executive lead a campaign targeting federal government to support proper paying conditions for university? Well, the answer to that is we are. We're in the media every day running a campaign on this stuff. And in fact, on Thursday, we have a National Day of Action. And we'd hope that as many RMIT members as possible will be able to participate in the National Day of Action. We are trying and we are doing whatever we can to put pressure on the government. But the difficulty we have is that the government, number one, does not like universities and it does not like this union. They've demonstrated that on a number of occasions. If those of you who were around when the Hewers were around, the higher education workplace requirements, workplace reform requirements, I think it was, they were a direct attack on our union, and this government is no friend of our union. So I do not expect them to provide any income in the short term. One of the things that we can do is to be able to demonstrate that that we are going to be united and we are going to fight them as far as we can. And we will continue to do that regardless of what happens with the framework that's been outlined to you today. The other difficulty we have at the moment is that the government, we're in an environment where people are losing their jobs across the whole economy. We've got people who are losing their jobs in airlines. We've seen people in hospitality industries who are losing their jobs. We are seeing significant damage done to the economy and to numerous people around the country. If we are looking at a double-digit unemployment figures, and we are looking at people losing all of their income by losing their jobs, how many people are going to come to the union? How many people are going to pay attention to the salaries and conditions of people in universities? How do we campaign to get more money put into the sector when there are other sectors who are far more that receive far more public attention than universities do? How will we be able to actually make that campaign work? Now, we are doing what we can, and we will do more. You will see ads in newspapers later this week. You will see online actions across the country. And in New South Wales, they are also doing a road cavalcade. So there are many things that are happening around the country, and we are continuing to campaign heavily against the federal government. But at the end of the day, we are not the only people in this economy, and the government is going to pick and choose the people that it chooses to support. And right now, we're not number one in their estimation. I will also say that I don't think the employers are particularly clever in some of their lobbying and capacity to be able to put pressure on the government. I think they adopt far too much of a small target strategy and are not willing to engage in the debates as heavily as I think that they should. And we've told them that, not that that's had a lot of impact. Catherine Greenfield has said, reading Uni Melbourne VC's response in a letter to staff, why would uni management want to agree to the NTEU framework if it strengthens our bargaining position? Yes, Catherine, that's actually the question. VCs, a number of VCs have said no to the framework, and primarily because it ties their hands. It makes it difficult for them to do things that they want to do. But the pro from the VC's point of view is that they need to be able to have the income to be able to protect campuses from closing and from jobs being lost. We are asking universities, prioritise the employment of your staff. Prioritise looking after ordinary staff who need, who at this time in particular, need the institutions to stand up for them. So we're asking them, sign the agreement, join the agreement, and allow us to jointly do what we can to protect as many jobs as possible. Catherine Lepic, I gather you've got your hand up. So Catherine, do you want to speak? Sorry, have we got Catherine?
Catherine, you need to take yourself off mute.
Catherine, if you're on mute, we can't hear you. Sorry, I'm not sure that is the problem. Catherine, I'm sorry. I'm being told that you're muted and we can't hear you. You can take yourself off mute so that we can hear you. Liam Ward's asked the question, why aren't we demanding that the employers commit to zero job cuts? These are the biggest pay cuts I've seen in any industry for many decades, and I think you're they're offering practically nothing in return. Liam, it's a practical reality. We have to negotiate with the employers. Does anyone here seriously believe we could get an agreement with the employers where they could commit in an environment when they're losing $5 billion that there would be no job losses? Do you seriously think that that's a serious prospect? And let me ask you back a different question. If it's not this framework, what is the campaign? What is the thing that we would do? How do we protect those jobs? Because I can't see another pathway to protecting those jobs. And I know the answer is going to be we need to campaign and campaign hard, and we need to have national strikes, and we need to do all of those things. Are you convinced that you can convince enough members to take unprotected industrial action where they will be subject to financial penalty under the law Are you convinced that you can convince enough members to make that the answer to the solution, make that a realistic prospect? And if it's not that, then what is it? What is plan B? Because it will come very soon. People think that we are already in it because some people have lost some casual work. Trust me, this has not yet started. The real pain is going to start hitting us very soon. Come second semester, the real pain will start to be seen as people lose their jobs left, right, and centre. And the question for us is, can we? Well, no, let me answer on a personal level. For me personally, I couldn't in all conscience stand by and watch people working in the sector lose everything. 10, 12,000 people. If I have a capacity to protect the income of those people, I will do everything I can to do that. I will take whatever unprecedented and unreasonable steps to try and protect as many jobs as possible in this sector. Because if a union is not about protecting people's employment, what is it about? We have to do what we can to protect people from the damage that is about to be done to them. And this is the mechanism that we have chosen. I would like to hear whether or not there is any serious prospect of doing something else. And yes, Liam, you can have a reply. I'll allow you to have a reply now if you like.
Hi there, Matt. I think the issue here is that, I mean, the NTEU themselves recognised, estimated this $5 billion shortfall in revenue across the sector. And then my understanding is the Vice Chancellors then went to the government and said, will you bail out the $5 billion? And of course, surprise, surprise, Morrison said no. I think it's appalling that our response to that has been to say to the government, that's okay, ScoMo, you don't have to fund this. We've got it. We'll take it out of our own pay packets. We'll take it out of our own living standards. We'll take that woman on 65K and cut her income by $375 a fortnight. We've got this. To me, there's two problems with this. One of them's a political problem, and one of them's just a basic campaigning problem. The political problem here is that our union has always stood for fully funded, accessible public education. That means that we have to actually be able to look the Morrison government in the eye and say, here is the bill. This is what it costs, right? I think it's appalling that we're not doing that, that you're asking us to turn around instead and say, that's all right, we'll take a cut. It's not really $5 billion. We'll wear it out of our own pockets. We'll get that woman on 65K to pay for it. So it's a political problem, which I think is appalling and shameful. It's also just tactically bankrupt, strategically bankrupt, that we would enter these negotiations with an open agenda of pay cuts before members were consulted. The NE voted on these motions to include concessions up to cuts to real hourly rates before any member in the country knew these negotiations were happening. That's actually true. I know you sent out an email. I know you're saying that that members were told in mid-March that these negotiations were happening. Well, I've gone back and looked at the email from Alison Barnes that mentions negotiations. The overwhelming impression that most members, including myself, will have taken from that vague one-sentence reference to negotiations was that we were negotiating with our university vice chancellors and executives for casuals to be paid for 2 weeks in the event of a campus shutdown, and that there would be pandemic leave, because that's what we were actually negotiating for. No one in the whole country, no rank and file member in the whole country in mid-March had any inkling that our national executive was in secret negotiations around pay cuts. So that is also politically appalling. But the point I'm making here was strategically, why would we go into these negotiations saying to management, you don't have to pay the bill, we're going to wear it? And I just think you should have to explain yourselves on that front, because it's a tactical failing that I haven't seen in generations of this union movement.
And I will. So let me just, two things, just on the email communication, just to be clear. I emailed, not Alison, I emailed every member in the country and advised them on the 8th of April of what we were doing. That was a week after the first discussion with the employers. So when there's a suggestion that there are all of these clandestine meetings and all this sort of stuff, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. As far as the question about the tactics of it, as I've said to you, this is an extraordinary set of circumstances we find ourselves in. It's not just a short-term budget hit for the institutions. We're talking about $5 billion. That's this year. That's this year. Anything that we do now is actually trying to stave off the inevitable, if we have the hits that are projected for next year also hit, we will see campuses close. We will see universities shut down. This is not, and the money that we are offering to the employers as part of this package do not even scratch the surface of the bigger problem. We are going to have to go to the government, and we will go to the government saying that we have done everything that could reasonably be asked of people, and you are still refusing to protect a vital sector in our economy. So I disagree fundamentally with the view that this is tactically flawed. I actually think it's strategically quite clever, because it provides and positions us as the people in control of the process. It puts the union in the centre of trying to protect people's jobs, and that's our job. We are here to protect people's jobs. And what we will find is when the matters get worse, and the government is going to have to put some money in. Otherwise, regional campuses in particular will close, and there will be serious downside across the whole economy. And the beautiful thing about the framework as it's being constructed, it is complicated. And it's complicated because it's designed to be able to be scaled up and scaled down depending on the circumstances. So if and when the government does put some money into the sector, then the measures can be reduced. It's designed to be able to impact on the way in which the employers act if we get a rescue package. And every time some institution is talking about, well, we're going to have to, we're going to have to move from category A to category B and things are getting worse, there's a headline there about why has the government not stepped in to protect the institutions when the staff have done everything that could reasonably be expected of them to do so. Tanya, I don't know if Tanya's speaking or is Tanya a question. What are the possible consequences of not supporting the framework? The framework is, the consequences are straightforward, really, Tanya. We're going to watch people get sacked at every institution. It's already started at some. I'm sure at RMIT you would have already had directions to reduce casual budgets. That's the start of the process. That's not the end of the process. They will be restructuring. They will be going through redundancies. There will be voluntary departure rounds. There will be a whole range of programs that are designed to protect the institutions from going under. It's not confected. It's not made up. They are in very serious financial danger. Some of them are very, very serious danger. So dangerous that if worse comes to worse, they could find themselves not being able to continue to function. This is an existential threat. People need to understand that this is such a massive threat to the sector and to individual universities. We are going to be seeing the rewriting of the sector. We are not suddenly going to find that at the end of the year, that everything goes back to how it was last year, because the income streams of the institutions will be dramatically different to the ones that we have been used to up until now. And we have all campaigned and all complained about the over-reliance on international income and the impact that has on the institutions and the corrupting impact that has on our institutions. And I stand by every word we've said on that over the years. But we've been saying it for 2 decades, and here it is. It's finally come to pass. Our predictions, the predictions that we have been campaigning about for 2 decades have come to pass. But it's cold comfort. It's cold comfort because just because we were right doesn't change the fact that the income of our institutions is now dramatically lower than it was previously. Okay, we've got 3 hands up. Mel Slee, Nicholas Minucci, I think that's correct. I apologise if I've mispronounced that, and Robin Laycock. So, Mel.
Hello. I just wanted to quickly correct the inaccuracies in the figures. I've put in the chat line as well. Liam said $375 per fortnight for a level 4 professional staff member. In fact, his calculations have failed to take into account the $30,000 threshold. So if a staff member is on $65,000, you minus the $30,000 threshold, and that leaves the remaining, which would experience the 15% reduction. So it's actually $200 a fortnight, not $375 a fortnight. Now, why does this matter? The first thing to say is that that's the absolute maximum that could happen to any staff member anywhere in the country. And so, you know, it gives the impression that we're all going to have this and that low-wage work is going to be hit the hardest. That's the way we're getting the progressive cut in place, is by putting that $30,000 threshold as the starting point. So those who are on lower income obviously take a lesser hit. The other thing I want to talk about is just I'll just finish on this point, just the request for the clauses. The schedule, people should read the heads of agreement, which is the schedule and the clauses written in plain English for you. We'd be in a lot of trouble if we just spewed out the clauses at you. You'd be trying to read literally legalese. So there's no sort of hidden anything. The schedule is everything that's intended to be in the schedule is in that heads of agreement in plain English for you, rather than bamboozling you with clauses. As Matt said, the clauses themselves will be available though shortly.
Thanks.
I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I'll treat that as a comment and not a question. We will put calculations up after the meeting. Nicholas.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Manakuchi, by the way, but that was close. All good, don't worry about it. So I wanted to just say that the issue that we're having is that there's two things. I'm going to be very brief. The calculations about the first 30K, if that's true, then I don't see in a legal reading of the clauses reflecting that, because fractions can be cut such that it reduces, it impacts the first 30K before the wage rate cuts, which don't take which are excluding the 30K, come into effect, and therefore leading to higher numbers. I posted a link that shows the analysis of the Fight Back people. If that's a mistake, if that's a bad clausing, then please correct it. The second thing is, where are the teeth in the framework that prevent employers from doing terrible things to us? Like, where's the actual meat of the substance of it? Because from what I've heard from the RMIT meetings, and I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but what I've heard from the meetings is that our current EBA is actually better. Can you please speak to that? Why this is better than our current EBA?
In some ways, this is better. I'm not going to pretend in every way is it better. But for example, just on managing change, while it shortens some of the managing change frameworks, it does mean that the union is involved in a discussion with management about the process of consultation. At the moment, you don't have that. It actually gives the union a role in trying to determine whether or not a restructure process is being managed in an appropriate way. At the moment, management can pretty much put an email out to everybody and say, oh, well, here's what we're proposing to do. Let me know by Friday whether or not you think that's appropriate. Now, in some circumstances, that can be treated as consultation. The local committee is a protection against management being able to do things without proper consultation, without proper process. It also provides us to access to rapid arbitration. And they're not talking about going to the commission for arbitration. It's an arbitrator that we have a role in choosing. It will have to be agreed arbitrators for dealing with these sorts of things. So that gives the union strong powers that we don't currently have to be able to deal with these sorts of things. The other thing that's probably worth mentioning is don't forget that the national expert panel is a pretty extraordinary thing. It is something that all institutions have to go to prove that they are in a financially constrained environment sufficient to justify what it is they're proposing to do. They are not required to go immediately to the 10% or the 15%, and in fact, many won't. So the real impact on people will be less than for most people, at least, than might be considered on first reading of the agreement. But the NEP is a very powerful body, and it allows us, or at least representatives of the union, to be able to properly scrutinise the budgets and the forecasts that are provided, and it requires that they be proportionate to the damage. It also requires that there are that the employers have taken other measures in order to reduce their liabilities or to improve their position, such as deferring capital programs, taking senior executive cuts, and other such things. So there are some very strong protections in there for the union, which is the reason why many of the employers are buying out. Why would they not agree to enter into something if it gave them all the power? If it gave them the capacity to recoup all of this money back from their staff, and yet still they're saying no? Gee, there's got to be something in there that's making them reluctant to do that. And that's because the union has an important and central role in policing the way in which this process works. So how will this is from Karen Douglas, how will the casuals provisions in the proposed framework operate if you're expecting big job cuts in semester 2? The point of the framework is to prevent the job cuts. I am saying that without the framework, there will be job cuts. There will be significant job cuts. There will be more job cuts than without the framework. The framework doesn't prevent all job cuts. It doesn't, where the work ceases to exist, then we can't prevent the jobs from going. If a campus closes and it's no longer there, you can't, the institutions we won't be able to force the institutions to keep people employed for whom the work has disappeared. So I'm not pretending it's perfect. I'm not pretending there is no downside to it. But I am doing what we are proposing to do with this framework is to protect as many jobs as possible. And if the employers sign up, there is a clear expectation, and not only expectation, enforceable provisions in the framework that will make it possible for us to challenge local decisions where they are inconsistent with the framework. These are legally enforceable commitments that the employers are making. So we have the capacity to be able to prosecute that where we find it. And I would say, as an organising tool, right now, I'd be going out to every workplace and trying to find out where budget cuts have applied and how they've applied. And are there circumstances where we could challenge under the framework the decisions that have been made? We could be doing things now to protect casual staff in particular that we're not doing, particularly at RMIT, because we're having this debate. We should be out there doing what we can to protect those jobs as much as possible right now. And instead, we're engaged in this discussion. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't mind the discussion. It's an important part of the process. But can we at least focus on protecting the jobs of the people that pay us to represent them? Because that should be our first and primary job in this whole exercise. Robin Laycock, we haven't heard from you. I apologise, I got distracted there. Robin.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
I just need to come back to Melsley. I'm afraid she's just plain wrong. I encourage everyone to just look and read clause 59 and 60. Clause 60 says, if a university is in Category B, the university may implement to amount equivalent to a maximum of 15% the salary of an employee from a combination of reduction in pay, reduction in time fraction, and deferral of pay rises. Only the reduction in pay exempts the first $30,000. So as the clause says, pay cut is by salary reduction is by 15%. I also would not point out that there was an interesting Age article from February that said unis are gathering a $12 billion war chest to confront the coronavirus. So I just think that's pretty interesting. Just had the brief question, if I can, Matt, is that you said that NTEU branches have polled their members, and the results of these have been used to claim widespread support for the concessions on wages and conditions.
No, I didn't say that. But continue.
Okay. But however, only one branch that we know of has actually released the full results of their poll at Curtin University. And I think the results are pretty interesting. They say that 69% of respondents agree to the general proposition that we should all be willing to make sacrifices to minimise job losses. But this support dramatically falls once the questions move to specific concessions. Only 22% agree of being forced to work part-time. Only 28% agree to pay reduction of between 5 and 10%. Can you tell us the figures for how many agreed to wage cuts, which amount to $365 for an average income, and it'll be $500 per fortnight for academics? Can you tell us the figures of the percentage of people who agree to that proposition?
I don't have those, Robin. So there's two parts to that question. One of them is about what the surveys did or didn't say, and the other one is about Mel's calculations. I have to say, Robin, I think you were correct about the calculations, but we'll go and check those, and we'll put something up to deal with to answer that question. As I said, there are hardship provisions in the agreement, and it's intended that it would disproportionately impact on higher paid people than lower paid people. It is designed to try and prevent those from making those at the lowest from making the heaviest lifts. Having said that, the fundamental principle of what it is we're trying to do is all of us take some responsibility for protecting those people who need protecting. We're trying to save jobs. This was a negotiation. It wasn't something where I can come to you and say, we got everything we claimed. We didn't. What we got was a negotiated outcome, and this is what it ended up looking like. So it's not perfect. I don't pretend it's perfect, but it is our best option to be able to protect jobs. I agree we should be campaigning. I agree we should be doing all of that stuff. And that is stuff that we will continue to be doing. But while we're doing that, people will be losing their jobs. People will be losing their incomes. And unless we're prepared to actually consider something of this sort, then we are going to find ourselves residing over a much smaller union into the future. And I have to say, at the moment, even if we manage to protect as many jobs as we hope to, we are still going to find that we are going to have significant membership drop as a consequence of this. Because when there are fewer people employed in the sector, there are going to be fewer members. It's as simple as that. We have to try and get the union to come out of this stronger. We need the union to be in the centre of protecting people's jobs and giving the union a form of authority that it hasn't had in over 3 decades, like a national framework where the union is at the centre of that. We've not had that sort of authority in decades. And this will significantly improve the union's ability to impact on the future structure and direction of the sector. And I'm not saying that that's all written into the agreement. That's not. That's a comment about the way in which this dynamic can play out if we play our cards right and we're prepared to do what needs to be done, protect people. On your other question, which was, about the surveys. My apologies, Robin. I don't have those with me, and I'd have to get permission from others. But look, to be honest with you, we're going to have a survey pretty shortly. So all of those things will be out very shortly. we're going to have a ballot of all members across the country. So we will know one way or another. Those surveys were done a while ago. They did not consider, they were not done in the knowledge of the framework that had been negotiated. So those were indicative only. We will look at, we will be having a plebiscite or a vote of all members, and we'll be doing that fairly shortly. I have got a couple of people who've stuck their hands up. Liam, you've already been given 2 goes. I might go to others who haven't yet had a go. So I will go to Alex Macaulay and then to Sylvia Greta Box. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your surname. My apologies, Sylvia. I'm obviously challenged in that regard, but I'll go to Alex first and we'll come back to you.
Yeah, a couple of things briefly. So yeah, Alex McCauley, I'm on the RMIT branch committee. In one of your previous answers, you said that variations to the agreement were going to be finalised next week. Were you talking about the RMIT Enterprise Bargaining Agreement in your answer?
No, I wasn't. What I was talking about, the way the framework works, it's a timing question. If we want to try and protect as many jobs as possible next semester, we need to get these things done as quickly as possible. So a single variation is being negotiated that will have very few, it won't be negotiated on a site-by-site basis with the employers, I mean. They either have to sign up to the framework or not. A couple of employers have come to us and said, oh, look, we quite like this, but we don't really want that, or we don't really want that. And we're not entertaining those sorts of discussions. And we've said, no, you're either taking the whole package or you're not taking it at all. It's not, you want the bits that you like and you don't get the bits you don't like. Okay. The schedule itself will be ready. It's in drafting. It should be finished shortly. It will, if the RMIT chooses to sign up, then it would be a variation to the RMIT collective agreement. And that would, of course, go to a ballot of staff at the institution as they would normally in any other case. And in addition, these would then be taken to the Electoral Commission, the Industrial Commission on bulk. So we would be looking to get them certified and coordinated the ballot process so that we get as many up as quickly as we possibly could.
Okay, so I wanted to take exception to your comments about the RMIT branch just debating this matter while allowing casuals to go. You will know it's exceptionally difficult circumstances. And what has been happening in a number of workplaces at RMIT is our members have been meeting, they have been getting organised to push back on the question of academic workloads. And in a couple of areas, we have saved casuals jobs through our academic colleagues refusing to consolidate classes to take on extra teaching load using the provisions in our existing agreements. So members have been doing what they can on the ground to fight against the layoffs of sessional academics in particular. I think the problem with all of this is that you still haven't demonstrated how the framework will save jobs. It will save universities money. It will give a couple of union appointees some ongoing roles to sit in with management, be consulted, but not with any actual teeth to prevent mass layoffs. And I think there's throughout the heads of agreement, there's a number of references to exceptional circumstances. There's the thing you talked about earlier, where if the work's no longer there, that being a get out of jail free card, I went through the business improvement process at Melbourne University. Melbourne University, at the height of its wealth, said, the work's not there, we can get rid of 500 professional staff. They find ways of fiddling the books, fiddling the org structures to do this stuff. So I just don't see how, with everything we're being asked to give up, this provides our members with any more security than what we have currently.
All right, look. I don't know how many ways I can say it. It's a legally enforceable document. It has provisions in it that we can challenge and we can dispute. So when people say, when people say that I don't believe it, well, it is in the text. It is legally enforceable. We have lawyers who have gone over it and assure us that we are able to challenge the circumstances that are built within it. It is designed, and it has been legally checked. It is designed to protect jobs. That's its purpose, and that's what it will do if it's put into place. The question I'd have, I've said this before, what's plan B? No, if we're not doing this, we are going to be watching people disappear. But I'm really pleased to hear that the branch has been actually doing some things around protecting casuals work. I think that's great. But what the framework will give you is a more robust tool to be able to do it with. It'll provide you with a mechanism by which you can challenge decisions to arbitrarily take work off casual staff and hand it to continuing staff. It'll help you protect the workloads of the continuing staff and protect the employment of the casual staff. There's provisions in there about no stand down without pay. So no one can be stood down without pay under the agreements. No one seems to have noticed these sorts of things. There's no generalised forced redundancy. Yes, there are circumstances, and I'm not going to pretend that every circumstance that this is a perfect solution to every problem. But I am saying that it's the best solution we could come up with. It's legally enforceable. It will protect jobs. And the question for everybody else is, well, what's plan B? If it's not this, what is it that we can do? And I note that, Sylvia, you've put your question in text. You said, just so that everybody knows, $250 per week cut in my salary will see me homeless in no time. I am the only person in my family working with a terminally ill husband. Well, I think that clearly counts as hardship. That clearly counts as a circumstance that's designed to be captured by the hardship provisions in the agreement. That's the sort of thing we can prevent. So we are trying to build in protections so that people like you do not find themselves without an income. Not only that, we're protecting your job. So hopefully we will be protecting your income, not damaging it. And I do understand that people don't necessarily accept what we're saying, but I can just assure you that we are doing everything we can in this to protect people's jobs. I would not be doing it if it wasn't for that. Sylvia, apparently you want to speak. That's fine. Put Sylvia on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, and I apologise for my mispronunciation.
Oh, that's okay. It's Sylvia Greda Bogusz. I know it's a mouthful, so don't worry about it. Matthew, thank you for allowing me to speak. And yes, I did put this particular situation of mine in there to highlight that I'm not the only one in that current situation. There's a lot more people like that. $250 per week, it's a lot of money, not only for me, but for a lot of other people as well. So I just put it in to highlight that there will be a lot of people like that in that kind of situation. But what I wanted to say, and you can take it as a comment, you can take it as an observation, or you can take it as a question. I have been, I'm not a young person. I have been in the Solidarity Union in Poland. I have been in prison. I have been beaten. I have been standing up strong against the communist government. So this kind of situation doesn't scare me. But what scares me is the way we seem to approach it. This is not a time for scaring people. It's not a time for siding with the government. This is a time to put views of an academic elite of this country to the current government in the strongest possible way. Yes, we have a lot of universities in this country for 28 million population. We've got far too many universities, but it doesn't matter, okay? It really doesn't matter. We should be protecting, not siding with the government. If the government allows for shutdown of the universities, how do you think this will go down with the voters into the future? Do you really think that the current federal government is going to last through the next election? And what they are after is to win the election. I have to tell you, they will not win the next election if they are not serious about supporting the elite of this country, the elite of people who are educating the next workers. And if the government can't see it, God help us all. That's all what I have to say.
No, thank you. And I agree with much of that. And I guess in terms of people finding themselves in hardship, Sylvia, we have been conscious of that in the way in which we've structured it. It is designed to protect those who are in the weakest positions, and it has mechanisms where people have got particular hardships to be able to exempt them. So that is all built within the structure of what we are trying to achieve here. But the biggest harm that can be done to somebody is losing their job altogether. And that's the thing that we are struggling with, because I can see no other mechanism. If people have got another way to protect the number of jobs that we're talking about, I would love to hear it, because I'd be open to anything. But at the moment, in terms of viable options, this is not an option that I want to be presenting. I would prefer not to be in the position of doing this. But if we are going to protect people's jobs, we have to be prepared to make some sacrifices. And this is an extraordinary set of circumstances. It gets said over and over again. I can't tell you what's going to happen with the federal government. I don't know whether or not they'll get re-elected. At the moment, Scott Morrison's ratings are pretty high because he's sort of generally seen to have managed the process of the COVID processes reasonably well. And he's the only one getting airspace at the moment. That will change when politics goes back to normal. But I don't know when that's going to happen. And I don't know whether or not the opposition parties are going to be able to get enough cut through. I don't know. I do know that it's very rare that universities become an issue that generate electoral interest. The most recent example where it has was with the $100,000 degree campaign, where I think we did make an impact. But we had a pretty clean air for a lot of that. We were able to we weren't competing with every other sector in the economy. We weren't competing with people losing their jobs at Qantas or at Virgin or in hospitality industries, or with the current crisis around the Chinese tariffs on barley. Like, these things are all very big stories, and the union and higher education gets a much better run when we are not crowded out by such loud voices. We will be able to make an impact if they start closing campuses. That will definitely be something that we will be able to prosecute. And I would like us to be in the position of having the moral high ground in that. We've done everything we can to save the sector, and now why are you not standing up to save the sector? But, we will have to wait and see. I am conscious that it's coming up to 2 o'clock and that a lot of people have started to leave. I'm just checking to see what other questions. Sure, Ros, you can go. Ros Ward. Yep.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I just wanted to get you to clarify the timing and the sequence of these decision-making processes. As far as I can understand, you're saying that the national ballot will happen on Monday. That's the electronic ballot, before we see the variation in schedules for the enterprise agreement at RMIT. This seems to me to be against very much the normal way of doing things, because every time we bargain, we are able to see the clauses, read through them and understand them. And I don't really buy the fact that we're not intelligent enough, or in fact, we don't have a lot of lawyers who are members of the NTEU who could look through these clauses. So I'd like you to clarify that. And I'd also like to invite you to come to our Vote No meeting, which is happening at 5 p.m. today. And everyone else who's in this meeting, if you want to hear the other side of the story, that's an open Zoom meeting. The link for that is in the chat. And also for people to check out some of our calculations and some of our interpretation of all of the clauses in the heads of agreement, which are at tinyurl/NTEU Fightback Resources for people who haven't had a chance to read some of the other side of the story as well.
Ros, I very much doubt at RMIT that very many people have not had the opportunity to view and listen to your materials. But just very, very quickly, you asked the question about when the variation will be made available and the timing of the ballot process. That's actually going to be a subject of some discussion between here and the council meeting tomorrow. I do think it's appropriate that people should be able to see the actual variation before they vote on it. I'm hopeful that we will be in a position to be able to give that out next week, which probably means that the ballot itself would have to be delayed. Now, I'm speaking out of turn here. I haven't talked to the National Executive about that. There's a meeting this afternoon that we'll be discussing that. But I do think it would be sensible. I think you make a good point about that. I'm not concerned about us making sure that the variation itself is available. So we will, that's a discussion that's going on at the moment. As far as the meeting is concerned this afternoon, I'm not particularly keen to come to a meeting where I'm going to be abused. I know that there have been several meetings that have taken place from the No campaign where other officers and staff have found themselves attacked and abused and quite aggressively in some instances, and I've got no intention of subjecting myself to that. All right, listen, I think we are at the end of the questions and comments that people have been made. Oh no, I beg your pardon. There is one question that hasn't been answered here that's been sent through from Michael. I'm just scrolling backwards. Kate Johnson Atatar. Would the cuts apply to staff regardless of how they funded? I'm an ECR employed on an externally funded project. What does no new external appointments mean for newly funded research projects where the positions are fully funded by external grant income? Actually, Kate, that's a really good question. And it's one piece of clarification that we are currently seeking from the employers because I don't think that was considered by either us or them when we originally did it. At the moment, we are in discussions with them about seeing if we can fix that problem because I agree with you that there's an issue. It does depend on the terms of the funding body. So we are going to be looking into that a little bit more closely to see if we can fix that problem between here and next week. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I do appreciate, even though many of the speakers have been against the proposition that we've put up, I think that many people have had an opportunity to ask questions and it's been a constructive debate and discussion, so I appreciate that, I hope people feel as if they've had an opportunity to talk. There will be a number of questions if you wanted to answer. You're not obliged to, but on exit, there will be some questions you'll be asked to respond to, just about whether or not you found this useful and what you thought about it. Please feel free to give me your feedback. I appreciate everybody's time. I know it's a lot of time to give to something like this, but it is very important. So thank you very much for participating, everybody. I hope to talk to you again soon.